Continuing in the Haggadah of Pesach from Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, he asks the question. We know we call Pesach Chag Pesach, and it's also called Chag Matzot. He says, what's the difference between Chag Pesach and Chag Matzot? And he brings a mashal. To answer this question. He says, once there was a king that was traveling with his men, and they were traveling in the forest, and all of a sudden they stumbled upon a young man who was a shepherd, who it seems like he took a break, and he was playing the flute on a little rock there with his animals around, and the king stopped, and he noticed this person playing beautifully with his flute, and he stopped to talk to this young man, and the young man was very smart, you could tell. He was a very smart man. And he says to him, you're a very smart man, you play the flute beautifully, you have a skill. And he says, what are you doing being a shepherd? He says, to be honest, I'm an orphan, and this is what was left. My parents passed away, I had a few animals, and this is what I do. I live in a simple home, I have a few animals, this is what I do. So the king says, you know what, you have a lot of potential. Come to the palace, come move in, let me raise you up. He brings him to the palace, and slowly he teaches him, and he brings him up, and before he knows it, he becomes a minister in the king's government. He becomes very beloved by the people, everyone loves him, and he's doing an amazing job. He's doing such a good job that the other ministers start becoming jealous. Everybody else loves him, but some of the ministers unfortunately become jealous. And now this smart young man, he became the minister of finance. All the other ministers that were jealous, they started telling the king, he's dealing with your finances, he's stealing. He says, what are you guys talking about? I brought him up from childhood, I brought him up from, I did everything for him. He's married now, he has kids now, he's not stealing. He said, no, he's stealing. And one day to the next, being pressured by the other ministers, the king finally approached this young man and he says, tell me something. I don't believe it. But are you stealing from me? He says, no way, chas v'shalom, you're like my father, you took care of me, how could it be? It can't be. And the ministers again pressured the king, says, go check his house. He's a nice house, go check his house. So the king finally felt pressured to go with a group and said, look, we want to come and check your house. If you have anything more than what you're supposed to have. He says, please, you can check my house, no problem, I promise I'm not stealing anything. And they go from room to room, and they see there's nothing extra there. And then they get to one room that's locked. And the man says, please, king, you checked everything. He said, please don't go in this room. And the ministers are there, this is the room. That's why. So, no, please, king, I beg you, I'm embarrassed about this room. Don't go in this room. Please don't go in this room. Of course, don't go in this room, because it's the room that has all the gold, that has everything you stole. So he said, the king said, I have to open the door. I have to see the room. So, not willingly, but he had to do it. The man opens up the door to that room. And when he goes into that room, he lived in a nice house. Everything was so nice now, this minister of finance, but that room was a very old-looking room. It had a table, and on the table was his flute, was his simple clothing, was his little bag that he used to have. And this man explained, look, there's no gold, there's nothing there. And the man explained to the king, look, you brought me up from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. I said to myself, I have to always remember my humble beginnings. I have to always remember where I came from so that it doesn't get to my head. So I dedicated this room in my house, and I had my old flute, and I have my stuff. So I go in there every so often, and I bring myself down to earth to where I once was. The king was so happy that he was an honest man, and those ministers were kicked out. That was the end of the story. And to this, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says, this connects to a midrash that says that David HaMelech and Mordechai HaTzadik, there's a connection that they were raised to a very high level, but they also always remembered where they were from. Mordechai HaTzadik, he was in Sakha Efer. David HaMelech was also at one point a shepherd. And the midrash goes on and on to say that even though Hashem brought them to high levels, they always remembered where they were at. And so too the midrash says that I love you, Bnei Yisrael, says the Gemara Masechet Chulin, the Peitet. How Hashem says, even though I bring so much good to you, you still put yourself small. Look at Avraham Avinu, I raised him up, and he says, Vanochi afar va'efer. What do you mean? You're Avraham Avinu. And you say about yourself that you're like dust and like ash. Moshe and Aaron, Yosef, V'nachnu ma, what are we? David HaMelech is vani tolat v'lo ish. And therefore, Rav Ovadia Yosef says, that's Chag HaPesach, Chag HaMatzot. Chag HaPesach is Hashem skipped over our homes and he killed the Egyptians, and look, we're free, unbelievable. Chag HaPesach is the celebratory way of expressing the holiday that we're on a very high level. Chag HaMatzot, the matzah, is the hard bread that we used to eat in Egypt that reminds us of our past. So even though we're on a very high level and we're doing well, we have to remember and be humble and remember our simple beginnings. And that's the difference between matzah and chametz. Chametz, bread rises. That's like ga'ava, it rises. It's like the Yetzer Hara. Matzah is simple, matzah is anava. And therefore, we're expressing that Hashem, we're free, hopefully going to be really free soon, B'ezrat Hashem, with Mashiach. But we also have to remember the humble beginnings, the matzah, and anava and humility. Amen. בנק השם רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך ירבה להם תורה מצווה שנאמר אדם חפץ מן צדקו ידיר תורה וידיר